Hello Simmers and welcome to Barbados in the eastern part of the Caribbean, where our Boeing 727 by FlyJSim is currently parked. I couldn't find any decent add-on scenery, so this is the standard Barbados scenery that ships would explain when you buy and install it. Not the best scenery for Barbados, but we're gonna make a flight with the FlyJSim 727, some VOR to VOR navigation to Sint Maarten. And in Sint Maarten we have some very nice add-on scenery that I purchased on the .org store. So the scenery will improve over time. Like I said, FlyJSim 727, freight version, AmeriJet livery, AmeriJet being a cargo airline that operates many flights to and from Sint Maarten Princess Juliana Airport, world famous for the approach into runway 10, with short final over Maho Beach, where you always see those beach guests at the fence trying to touch the landing gear of passing airplanes. Still love to go there sometime. Would have loved to lay on that beach when a 747 would fly over it, but those days are history, unfortunately. So that's something that will never happen again. Anyway, 727 by request of Falco, who also asked me to point out some specifics on the camera settings that I'm using in terms of add-ons, etc. Well, there's not much to tell about it. I only use the standard X-plane views. I'm not using any add-ons, so no X camera or anything like that. I tried X camera, I couldn't get used to it, so stopped using it. And with the normal views in X-plane, well, I think I can use them to make some very nice shots. So what I usually do, let me just pause the picture like this for a moment. If you go to the views menu, you go to external, you have some options with shift and numeric keys assigned to it. We're now in shift 4, the external view, and the view that you see me use on takeoff quite often as soon as I leave the ground is shift 2. This will put the camera in one position where it remains, and then the airplane flies past it, but I will demonstrate that later in the video. As mentioned, this is shift 4. I use the num keys on the keyboard for the other views in the airplane. You can move around with using the arrow key. So if you press your left arrow key, you go to the left, right to the right, up, up, down, down. There's nothing complicated about that. And once you have a view that you like, you can press your right control and any numpad key or any key on your numpad on the keyboard, and that will assign that specific view to that key. So for instance, we're now looking at the APU control panel for the flight engineer. I've set my captain view to numpad 4, so if I press 4 now, boom, there we are. If I press 6, we are at the first officer's panel. 5 is the center panel. 8 is the overhead. 9 is the APU. 7 is the flight engineer's panel. 3 is the pedestal. 2 is the throttle section with the trims, flaps, etc. And I mainly use this view to start the engines. And with numpad 1 we have the lower part of the flight engineer panel. So anyway, we are going from Barbados to Sint Maarten over the eastern part of the Caribbean. VOR to VOR navigation, no other nav aids on board. So what we'll do is we'll take off runway 9 in Barbados. We then have to climb out until we reach 2,500 feet or 7 miles from the VOR, but we will reach 2,500 feet much sooner than the 7 miles. Make a left turn heading north, then a left turn to the northwest. Intercept this radial to the Martinique VOR, and then a right turn to the Pointe-à-Pitre VOR, and then slightly left to ANU VOR, which is Bird St. John's, and then it's a left turn to the Papa Juliet Mike VOR, for an approach into Sint Maarten. Let me see if I can get the chart. Yeah, there it is. So we'll fly into the VOR, fly outbound until we are 10 miles out, make a left turn to establish ourselves on the 09er. I thought it was 4 or 5 radial. We'll look it up on the chart when we get there. And then we have to fly the vertical profile, the glide slope ourselves. There's no ILS, so that's visual. But we can use that DME, that VOR, to guide us to the runway. So that's what we will do. So a lot of VOR to VOR navigation. That means that there is not much to prepare, but let's start with the weight and balance of the airplane. We're a cargo flight. We will have 12,657-ish kilos of cargo on board, and we'll need approximately 9,000 kilos of fuel. So let's just see what the load of the airplane is. We now have 17,000 kilos of cargo, which is a little bit too much. So let's randomize that until we are more in line with that 12. So 12,730 is okay. And then there is 11,000 kilos of fuel on board, which is, well, plenty. I'll just leave it like that. The expected trip distance is 389 miles, and we now have fuel for 1,000 miles, so that's plenty. So that's it for the weight and balance. Let us just set the ground power units. Go to the flight engineers panel, we'll switch on the battery, set the external power to on. There we are. And now we can prepare the airplane for the flight. So what we first do is a lights check. Start at the overhead, move strip by strip, top to bottom. Make sure that all the light bulbs are working. Then it's down to the captain's side, also strip by strip. Make sure that the lights work, which they seem to do. Press the ground proximity warning system test button, which is down there.
Glide slow. Pull up. Wind shear.
Down
Wind
here,
shear.
check that
Wind
these
shear.
lights are all working, which
Terrain.
they do.
Enough.
Flight engineers panel,
Airspeed low.
upper half.
Sink rate. Pull up.
Also
Terrain.
strip by strip,
Pull up.
top to bottom.
Don't sink. Don't sink.
Then the lower part
Too
of this
low.
panel.
Terrain. Too low. Gear. Too low. Flaps. Too low. Terrain. Glide slow.
And
Bank
then
angle.
the
Bank angle. 100.
APU panel,
50. 30.
that's working.
20. 10. 500.
Check the fire bell warning system on the APU. That works. Also for the engines. That's working. Check the stall warning. That's okay. And the flight recorder is also okay. Switch on the window heats and the navigation lights. And let's already start up that APU. And in the meanwhile, while the APU is starting, we can already set some radio frequencies and courses and headings. So let us take the chart for Bridgetown on Barbados. That's noise abatement. Aircrafts departing runway 09er or 27 northbound, so that's us. Jet aircraft, that's us, shall climb to 750 meters or 2,500 feet, or proceed to 7 nautical miles, whichever comes first, and continue climbing at the best possible rate of climb. So basically it's just up to 2,500 feet, a left turn heading 360, and then we'll continue our climb to the assigned cruise level. It's a very simple airport. We are down here, we have to taxi all the way down here to runway 9, then we'll take off and we'll head out. Once we arrive over Princess Juliana, we'll fly in via this radial, and then it's an outbound radial 288 until we hit the 10 DME arc. Then it's a left-hand turn to intercept and establish on the 09er 6 radial for the Papa Juliet Mike VOR inbound to the airport. So that will be the flight for today. Let us put ourselves on the map. We're now down there. So to proceed on that flight, first thing we have to do is put on the Foxtrot Oscar Foxtrot VOR or Martinique VOR, which is on 113.3, and we'll fly down there on radial 330 or course 330, so that's down there, and that's 113.3, so that's set. After that we continue towards Pointe-à-Pitre on the 358 course, frequency 1129. So 1129 is now set as a backup frequency for nav1 and as the active frequency for nav2. So as soon as we're in range, we will see a distance reading on the DME2. And after Pointe-à-Pitre, we'll continue to ANU or VC Bird St. John on 114.5 on the 359er course. So 1145 is set as standby frequency for nav radio 2. And for now, the stretch from Martinique to Pointe-à-Pitre will be on the 358 radial. So dial in 358 as a course on this display, which is done. 330 on this one. I will set the heading for the initial climb out to 095. There we are. So that's now set. We can listen to the ADIS for the correct weather information.
Tango, Bravo, Papa, Bravo, airport information, Foxtrot 1100 Zulu, weather, wind 126 at 13, visibility 10,000, sky condition 1,400, scattered, ceiling 3,400, broken, temperature 28, dew point 25, QNH 1014, advice on initial contact, you have information, Foxtrot.
So 1014 on the QNH. We'll dial that in here. And by now this is done. Let's take a look at the takeoff performance. We will take off using flaps 5. Set the speed box, and the trim has to be at 5.44 units. So let's get to this panel, switch on the electric hydraulic pumps. They're now engaged. And then we have to set the trim button to the trim to 5.44. It's now at 9er. This is 5. So 5.4 somewhere down there. So trim is set. Let's continue with the preparation on the Flight Engineers panel. We have an APU that is started, so we can now close the system. That has the APU supply power to the airplane, meaning the external power can now be released. So that's dismissed. Galley power that can remain off because we are already proceeding for the engine startup. We can close this system. No, not yet. We have to start the engines first. I'm sorry. APU is now powering up the airplane. Verify that the engine APU bleeds are open, which they are, that the packs are off, they are, and the gas prevent is off, which it is. Cruise altitude for our flight will be flight level 300, so we have to set our pressurization system. So 300, that's 30,000. Dial that in here. In this table, look up the cabin altitude at 30,000 feet. It should be 3,600, so dial this 6,000 to 3,600. And then on the flight plan we can see that the elevation for Princess Juliana Airport is 14 feet. So dial this one down to 10. That's it. We can turn on the boost pumps for the fuel system. They're on. doors are closed, so we can now set this one to the flight modes. Let's call up the ground, arm the emergency lights. No smoking and seatbelt signs are on, and let's call the ground crew for the pushback.
Ground to cockpit. Please show me where you want to go.
That's already set.
Ground to cockpit. Tow is driving up.
Roger. Let's set the auto brakes to RTO. So basically now we are ready to for startup, so we just have to wait for the pushback tug to arrive. There it is. Now you can do this, but just when you go to your Shift F4, you get this view. If you press the lower or the down arrow key, you can zoom in, and with your upper arrow key you can zoom out, and then with left and right you can just
okay, all doors and hatches are closed, ready to connect.
Rotate around the airplane. What you can also do is press the comma key to zoom out, or the point to zoom in. And when you zoom out, and then you use your scroll button to zoom in, and then you can basically adjust the speed at which the camera is rotating around the airplane. So zoom out far with the comma, and then zoom in with the scroll button. And when you zoom out, you will see that the rotation speed it seems to be higher.
Tow connected and bypass pin in service. Release parking brake.
Brakes released, clear to push.
Starting pushback, and you may start engines.
Starting sequence, first 3, then 1, then 2. Starting number 3. So we move the starter to the ground position. We check that N2 is rising. And as soon as that hits 20 or is above 20, then we'll open the fuel flow. Right now, so fuel open, you can see the fuel flow starting to rise, as well as the exhaust gas temperature, and N1 is now rising. As soon as this one is at approximately 12 or 14, you will see the engine pressure ratio starting to rise. And the start is stable when this reaches 105. This needle is at the green, this one is at the green, this one is at the green, and the fuel flow is at 1000. So that is right now. You can see now that the starter light is off. So that's a good engine start on number 3. Starting 1. Same drill. N2. Wait for it to reach 20. There it is. So starting number 1. Fuel flow on. Fuel flow is rising, exhaust gas temperature is rising, N1 is rising. Make sure that the exhaust gas temperature gauge doesn't exceed the red tape, otherwise you'll have a hot start. We can see the EPR now rising. The light is out. And engine 1 is also stable, so off, and engine start number 2. It's all so smooth. That's why I really love the FlyJSim 727. The movement of the gauges. It's very accurate, very smooth, beautifully modeled. I'm always in love with this airplane. So open the fuel flow. Fuel flow is rising. Temperature is rising. N1 is rising. N1 is over 14. EPR is rising. The light is out. And we have a good start on engine number 2 as well. So this one goes off. We'll set the probe heaters on. Turn on the transponder to TARA. At the flight engineer's panel, we'll close the circuits. So the generators are now on the buses. Generator 1 is providing power. The galley power can be switched on. This is all good. PEX can be switched on. Gas prevent goes on. This is all okay. Flight mode is already selected. Pumps are on. Let's open crossfeed valves. All the readings are normal, so we can now switch off the APU.
Operation complete. Set parking brake.
Brakes are set, clear to disconnect.
Disconnecting tow. Stand by.
So let's set flaps 5. Then already perform our flight control check. So full left, full right, neutral, down, up, neutral. And as soon as the tug is disconnected, we can do a rudder check, and once we have the clear signal, turn on the taxi lights and be on our way to Princess Juliana.
Tow is disconnected. Bypass pin has been removed. Hand signal on the right. Well, see you next time and have a safe flight.
Thanks for your help. See you next time. Bye bye. So the rudder full left, full right, neutral. Clear signal is received. Taxi light on. Brake released. Let's do a takeoff config warning test. No sound, so that's good. Brake test. Brakes are working. And here we go to runway 9. Now if you press shift 2, and then with your arrow keys you can change the camera position. But this is also the view that I use on takeoff. Camera in a fixed position and the airplane just taxiing or flying past it. Oh, love the sound set in that airplane. Those old noisy engines really brought that feel to this add-on. I really like it. So flight director can be set to heading mode. You will see that it banks because of course we are now on 275 and the desired heading is 095. So once we are lining up, this should be straight. Of course, the autopilot system is a little different from what you're used to if you're flying, for instance, the Zibo mod or the IXEG 737 or any Airbus. First of all, the position is completely different. The autopilot controls are here. With this being the engage-disengage switch. In here you always have to set heading select if you want the airplane to fly to the heading buck. And you have to press Alt select as soon as you enter a different altitude. In here is the vertical mode, pitch selector. I will set it to indicated airspeed as soon as we're airborne. And that will have the airplane fly at a pitch attitude to maintain the speed that is well pointed out by the speed buck. If you take a look from the control tower, which is shift 5, there you can see us on our way to the runway. As you can see right now, I've set my altitude to be changed by the thousands. If you want to change it by hundreds, just switch the mode, switch over, and then you're on the hundreds. Taxiing quite rapidly. Let's just ease back a little bit on the power levers or the thrust levers. Hit the brakes for this final turn towards the runway. So let's switch on the strobe lights. And let's say that we are clear to line up and wait. So runway turn off lights on, taxi lights off.
Approaching 0,
and
9.
now when we make the left turn on the runway, you will see the heading, the flight director starting to go horizontal when we are on the heading that we have set the heading back to.
On runway 0, 9.
There it goes. Again, very smooth. Here we are. Waiting on the runway. Let's say we are cleared for takeoff. So landing lights on, taxi lights off, runway turn off lights off, strobes on. Navigation and beacon lights on, auto brakes are at RTO, cabin signs are on. Well, we're a cargo plane, so that's not too exciting. We are good to go. There are no strange warnings on the indicator at the flight engineers panel. So flaps are at 5, so yoke forwards. Brakes off, and let's start our takeoff roll. So at 8:40 local, we'll set takeoff power. Thrust set, airspeed active.
80 knots.
80 knots cross-checked.
B1. Rotate.
Rotates. Positive rates. Gear up. This is the shift 2 view again. Oh, that sound. Just gotta love those old airplanes. Anyway, let's proceed on this initial heading of 09 or 5-ish. Let's climb at approximately 2,000 feet per minute. Make sure that the airplane can gain a little bit speed. So let's ease back on the power levers or on the thrust levers. Lower the nose. We are now 2,500 feet. Trim the nose down. No, we don't want to descend. That's a little bit exaggerated. There we go. So let's set the autopilot on, heading select, alt select, set this to indicated airspeed holds, and set the airspeed bug to 250 knots. Flaps 2, gear off, auto brakes off, And let's make a left turn heading 005.
Altimeter setting.
And we are reaching our transition altitude, or we've passed that, so transition QNH standard 1013, 29902. And make sure that we have that on all 3 gauges. There we are. And flaps up. The air temperature is still well above 10 degrees, so there's no need for anti-ice. There are no clouds above us, by the looks of it. So let's make sure we have an equal amount of power on each engine. With the side deck throttle quadrant, it's always a little bit of fine-tuning required. So it's between 186, 187 on number 3. Let's try to get the other ones in there as well. It's very sensitive to the power levers, thrust levers. Very small inputs. And here we go, 2,500 feet per minute. Passing 10,000 feet, so let's set the speed back to 300. Switch off the landing lights. For what's worth, let's switch off the fasten seatbelt signs. Take a look at the charts. Let's fly on this heading for a bit, then when we are clear of the island, we'll make a left turn to 300. To intercept and establish on the desired radial. It's not identified yet, it will be shortly. We now have a DME reading on nav radio 1, so that means that the VOR is identified. And this is a good moment to make a left turn heading 300 to start to establish ourselves on the radial. So left turn heading 300. Let's say we are clear to climb fly level 300. Press Alt Select. As you can see, we are now on an intercept heading for this radial towards Martinique. And we can also see that this radial is, that we are moving towards it, because this part of the gauge is now moving towards the center. And as soon as it's in the middle, we'll make a right turn. And then this is one straight line, with this being the middle section. It's all in line with each other, and then you are flying towards the VOR. With this being the distance that you are away from the VOR. This will never get down to 0, by the way, because even when you're flying straight over the VOR, because you are flying at altitude, there will still be distance towards that beacon. So right now we're flying, I think that by the time that we reach it, we will be flying at flight level 300, so 30,000 feet. So there will always be 30,000 feet distance, even when we are flying on top of the beacon. So don't wait for this to reach 0, because it won't. And I find the map in X-Plane that you just open with your M for Mike key, being a pretty nice nav aid for VOR to VOR navigation. So we took off, made a left turn once we were clear of the island. So in terms of noise abatement, I think we did a pretty nice job by staying as much over sea as possible. But what I will do is I'll switch the flight director from heading to navlock. Now you can see that the airplane already wants to bank to start to intercept this. So we are now in heading select mode, and I will change that to navlock. Move this to left. The heading select light will extinguish, and now the airplane knows that it can start a shallow right hand turn to establish itself on the 330 radial towards Martinique. Let's check our engines. Percentage is well in the green on all engines. Oop, that was the wrong way. EPR is almost equal on each engine. Exhaust gas temperature is nice in the green. N2 percentage is high but still in the green. The fuel flow is high, of course, but that's normal after takeoff during climb. As soon as we reach our flight level, our cruise altitude, of course we can reduce power, so the fuel flow will be lower. And during the descent we close the thrust lever, so it will be at 1,000 feet, 1,000 pounds per hour. It's perfectly normal to burn most of your fuel during the climb. So now we are in that turn to establish ourselves on that radial, so let's dial up the heading as well. And we are still 91 miles out of Martinique. As you can see here, we are now perfect in line towards that VOR. So I'll continue en route once we are near Martinique and we have to set some other courses, frequencies. I'll be back with you guys. I'm not gonna sit here and wait and have you watch 87 miles tick away, because that's way too boring. So I'll see you in a bit. So we are now starting to approach the beacon, and roughly 10 miles away. So let's switch the heading select on. We'll switch because DME2 is identified the nav radio to 1129, and we need to intercept the 358 course. So let's set course to 358. Then we'll set this one back to the nav lock. Then the airplane will start its turn towards the 358 radial. Now what we also know is that the next waypoint will be 1145. So let's dial that one in as standby in nav radio 1. And on that leg we'll have to fly 359er. We are now on that course, so let's dial up the heading buck. And with 104 miles to go before we reach it, we've now made that turn towards Point Tapitre. And what we also have to do is establish our top of descent. We are flying flight level 300 to 30,000 feet, so divided by 1,000 equals 30 times 3 equals 90, so approximately 90 miles out we have to start our descent. That is 90 miles for the Papa Juliet Mike, which is on 113.00. So we can dial 11300 as a standby frequency in nav radio 2. And 90 miles out, that is roughly over ANU. That's actually quite close, so I think that we'll start our descent somewhere between Pointe-à-Pitre and ANU. Since Pointe-à-Pitre is only 90 miles away, let's take a look at the approach procedures for Sint Maarten. So we're flying in, heading 320. We'll fly outbound on the 288 radial until we are at 10 DME arc. Then we'll start to make a left-hand turn to establish ourselves in the 0906 radial. When we start to make that turn, we have to be at 1600 feet. That's important for us to know. The missed approach altitude is 4,000 feet on heading 180. And straight in landing minimums for this airplane is 756. So we can dial that in here. And also in here then. So that's in store for us when we are arriving over Princess Juliana Airport. We're not there yet, still en route. Let's take a quick look. We are now, let's take a look at the speeds. That is decreasing, so we have to step up the power a little bit. Let's make that 170 EPR. See if it's now increasing. Seems to be rather stable right now. Let's just leave that 170, see what happens. We are about at the right speed. Still 70 miles to go. When we are overflying Dominica. We are well clear of the clouds here. And the good news is that the 1145 VOR, or the VC Bird St. John, ANU that is already identified, so we're doing quite well in here. After Pointe-à-Pitre I will initiate the descent. It will be roughly 1,500 feet per minute. So in 2 minutes we'll descend 3,000 feet. We are at 30,000 feet, so it's roughly a 20-minute descent. There's no altitude given on the charts for overflying Sint Maarten VOR, but I think that we have to be at roughly 3,000 feet once we pass over this. Gives us another 1,400 feet to lose on a 10-mile stretch, so that shouldn't be a problem. And of course we will lower the speed once we are here. Speed is rising slowly. So let's put the power ratio to, let's say, 168. I think that will keep us stable for a while. This is what I love about flying these airliners without auto throttle. You're constantly monitoring, adjusting. It's so much more rewarding to make a flight with an add-on like this than with, for instance, an Airbus add-on. Because in an Airbus you have to do all the work on the ground, take off, switch on the autopilot, sit back, relax and watch, which is basically quite boring. But with these old planes you have to be all over the place all the time. So let's take a quick look at the flight engineer's station. Everything looks normal. Pressurization is good. We still have fuel in each tank, which is also very nice. Everything is well under control. 45 miles to go to Point of Petra. Such a beautiful add-on. I really love the shape of this airplane. The way they use the PBR materials, I love it. Always check that your heading is dialed up correctly, because as soon as you are over the VOR or start to approach it, and you have to change to the next one, I always switch my autopilot over to heading select. And of course it would be very inconvenient if you have your heading set to the previous heading, so for instance 300, and if the airplane starts to make a left-hand turn all of a sudden, that's not what you're looking for. You want it as smooth as possible. Let's see if we can get some weather information for Sint Maarten already. So 122.02.
Tango, November, Charlie, Mike, airport information, Juliet 1100, Zulu, weather, wind 084, at 9er, visibility 10,000, sky condition 1,500, scattered ceiling 3,400, broken temperature 28, dew point 24, QNH 1017, advise on initial contact, you have information, Juliet.
1017, we do have that easterly wind, so we're gonna make a approach into runway 10 with some crosswind, but we should be alright. Some clouds, lovely day, 28 degrees, 4 degrees above the dew point, so good visibility. Just the way we like it. So we're now 14 miles out of the DME. So what we'll start to do now is basically switch to the heading mode. So heading select. We can flip the frequency to 1145 and nav2 to 113. And we have to be at course 359er. So now we can switch this one back to nav lock. That will have the airplane establish itself on the ILS or on the VOR radial. So we should be at the next waypoint 57 miles from now. So I think that approximately when we are, let's say 15 to 20 miles out of the next VOR, we have to start our descent, so that I will start to slow down at approximately 30 miles out. Close down the thrust lever, switch this one to IAS hold, because the loss of power, the airplane wants to keep the speed that is on. So if we dial the bug down, close the throttles, the needle will start to move down. And as soon as the needle hits the speed bug, you will see that the airplane starts to descend in order to maintain speed. That's the way you start your descent in an old airplane like this. And we're getting there fast. Speed is good, really like that 168 engine power radio. It's giving us exactly the thrust that we need to maintain this speed. Everything nice in the green, 80% N1. Something like 85% N2. Nice fuel flow, just under 2,500 pounds per hour. And an exhaust gas temperature that's well within limits, just above the 420 degrees. Let's see if you have to make any preparations in the flight engineers panel. But everything still looks good. We're progressing nicely towards VC Bird or St. John's. And what is important for us to know is that the final stretch from ANU to Papa Juliet Mike is on a 321 course. And we also have to dial in 1130 as the standby frequency for nav radio 1. So roughly 30 miles out, let's start to decelerate to 280 knots. So set the speed bug. Reduce power. And let's say that we are clear to descend to 10,000 feet already. Alt select. And set this one to IAS holds. Now we close the power levers. Not completely, then you get this warning. It will set them very low. EPR 100s. And you can see the speed is now dropping. We will start our descent, as you can see here. We'll maintain speed to 80 knots. And our descent towards 10,000 feet has now commenced. So let's fasten seatbelts. Well, the auto brakes, let's set them to medium. It's not the longest runway in Sint Maarten. So we are now 13 or 12 miles out, so we start to approach it quite rapidly. So verify that the heading buck is still accurate. Switch heading select. Flip the frequency to 1130 and dial the course to 321. And flip this one back to nav lock. And now once the airplane is intercepted, 100 miles away from Princess Juliana, we've started our descent, making a turn straight for the island. 2,000 feet per minute. Until we reach 10,000 feet. So right now we're on the final, well, at least not the final leg, but well, the final stretch towards Sint Maarten. Basically the chart says we have to be on a 319 course. So let's see what happens if we do that. Fly a little bit further to the right first. Follow the airway. Now, by the way, if you think that you're descending too fast and you want to reduce your rate of descent, you just increase the amount of power a little bit. And you will see that that will rapidly change the rate of descent. So far, I actually quite like 2,000 feet per minute. Still have 12,000 feet, so that's 6 miles to go. And with current ground speed, that is, I wouldn't be surprised if we are getting very close to Princess Juliana by then. And we still have to descend through 10,000 feet to approximately 3,000 feet to overfly the airport and establish ourselves. And we have to slow down. So for now, I'm quite happy with the rate of descent as it is. So I'm not going to insert extra power. Clouds are still way below us. Temperature is already above 0, so I don't think we need anti-ice for our descent. We'll just have to keep an eye on the temperature as soon as we start hitting clouds. We might have to switch to dawn, but it's not expected for now. And if you think that you are not descending fast enough, you can always apply speed brake. That will increase the rate of descent. I think we're going to do just that because we're now not descending rapidly enough. And here you can now see that the speed brakes are slightly up, increasing drag, increasing the rate of descent. But at 3,500 feet per minute, that's a little bit too much. And dial up the heading buck, of course. Always make sure that the heading buck points towards the white arrow in here and is not aligned with the white line in here. This is your track, your course, and this is the heading. And the heading is the direction the nose of the airplane is pointing, and the track or course is the direction it flies to. So what this tells me is that because my heading buck is to the right of this needle, there is wind coming in from the right trying to blow us off course, and the airplane is compensating that by pushing the nose slightly to the right so that the entire airplane is flying on this line. But if I were to put my heading with this line, the airplane would make a left-hand turn and start to drift, of course, to the left. So always make sure that you put your heading at the white arrow at the top of the gauge, and do not put it at the same course as your course indicator is. So we're now approaching 11,000 feet, 10,000 feet coming up quite rapidly. So let's close the speed brakes. We are now 800 feet within our limits. So what we'll do is we'll dial down the speed to 250 knots and set altitude to 3,000 feet. Alt select. So the speed is decreasing, and as soon as the white needle hits the orange speed buck, you will see the rate of descent start to increase again, or decrease. Yeah, rate of descent start to increase. We go, and here we are descending. So transition altitude is 5,000 feet. We are now descending below that, so let's read out the ATIS for Juliana once more and set the correct QNH.
Tango, November, Charlie, Mike, airport information.
Switch
Lima
on the landing
120,
lights.
Zulu, weather, wind 084, at 13, visibility 10,000, sky condition, few clouds at 1,500, temperature 29, dew point 24, QNH 1018, advise on initial contact, you have information. Lima
1018, so let's dial that one in here.
Tango, November.
And here. And here. So the air temperature is 20 degrees plus, so there is absolutely no need to put on any anti-ice. The clouds are still way below us. They will be at 1500 feet, so when we turn in we could be in the clouds. So an extra reason to pay very close attention to your navigation instruments. We're 40 miles out. I think we will be on the ground in roughly 20 minutes. Maybe 15. Just have to wait and see. We are approaching the airport rapidly. There's some strong winds up here, causing some turbulence. But we're still in good shape for the final stages of our flights. So there's the island of Sint Maarten. Basically I want to descend to 1600 feet now. We'll be overflying the airport in a descent towards 1600 feet. 1600 feet being the altitude at which we have to make the left-hand turn to intercept the VOR 096 radial towards Papa Juliet Mike for final approach. Into runway 10. Still 25 miles out. And I don't think that's Sint Maarten, that is probably St. Bart. Of course, very close to Princess Juliana Airport. Very challenging GA runway. Very exciting approach to St. Bart's. So 22 miles out, let's increase some power to reduce our rate of descent. Want it at approximately 500 feet per minute. Very slight adjustments on the throttle levers, thrust levers. 16 miles out. Let's reduce power and start to decelerate to 220 knots. We're now 11 miles out, so let's switch back to the heading selects. Change the course to 288. And we have to intercept that one for the outbound leg. 10 miles to descend to 1600 feet. And here we are past the clouds with a view on Sint Maarten, with the airport being, I think it's there. Yep, that's the airport. Let's increase power to reduce our rate of descent. I think this one will start to move in quite rapidly, so that's why I'm standing by in this view. As soon as this one starts to move, we'll switch this one to nav lock. So here we are. Let's fly heading 288 till we are 10 miles out. Change course to 094. I'm not going to use the VOR. Or 096 it was. So there we are. Bugger, heading selects. That was a mistake on my side. Let's also start to slow down to 180 knots. Set flaps 1. Reduce power. As soon as the speed reaches 200, we'll set flaps 5. Flaps 5. Let's take a look at our landing speeds. Flaps 30, VREP 126. We're almost 10 miles out now. So let's close the thrust levers for that final descent into Princess Juliana. Let's cannot arm the speed brakes. So 180 knots, descending. We're now at the 10 DME mark for Papa Juliet Mike. So let's start to make a left-hand turn to 126 to start to establish ourselves on that 0906 radial into Papa Juliet Mike. Now we are at 1600 feet, so the airplane will level off. Let's increase power to make sure that we maintain our speed. Let's reduce that to 160. And we have a moving, basically localizer coming out of the turn, so reduce the thrust. This is still on nav lock. This will also go to nav lock. So we'll maintain this heading until we are established. Flaps 15. Lights are on. Let's switch the runway turn-off lights on as well. Auto brakes are set. Establishing ourselves on final. 9 miles out. Runway is in sight. Let's reduce our speed to 140. And let's disengage the autopilots. Autopilot disengaged, pilot has control. Increase some power. Extra flaps, 7 miles out. We are visual with runway 10. 6.5 miles. Gear down. Let's start a shallow descent into that runway. Straight ahead. Altitude, of course, that is not correct. Let's set that to 4,000 feet, being the missed approach altitude. And we need to set our speed to 126. Let's add some extra flaps. We want flaps 30 on landing. This is 25, so flaps 30 sets. 1,000 feet, stabilized, missed approach altitude set. Drifting slightly to the left. 1,000 feet check. And let's increase power because the speed is dropping too much. Very gentle control inputs on the thrust levers. They're very responsive. Continue landing.
Approaching 10.
Check 10 is verified and correct. We are slightly low. We're trying to correct that. Of course, this is a non-precision approach, so don't be bothered by this line being off. We're not flying towards the DME or the VOR. We are flying towards the runway. We are visual with the runway, so we'll just switch off the flight director. That will only give us misleading information. And let's increase our rate of descent. We are now on the glide path, 700 feet per minute. Speed is slightly low. Over Mao Beach, here we go.
100.
Let's send bless some tourists.
50, 40, 30, 20.
Reversers. Knots, thrust idle, reversers normal. Auto brakes are disengaged, manual braking.
3,000 feet remaining.
And here we are at Princess Juliana Airport at Sint Maarten. Let's take a look at that landing from the outside, because I thought it was pretty smooth. This is, by the way, shift 3. That gives you the runway view. So let's speed this up a little bit. Over the beach. Flared a little bit too aggressive. Well, let's take a look at that landing a little bit closer with the airplane. I thought that final rate of descent was actually quite high, but the touchdown itself seemed quite smooth. But we are perfect in the touchdown zone and on the center line. Ooh, this was a nice landing. Just listen to those engine sounds. I really love the sound pack that they have included with this airplane. This is one of the best add-ons in X-Plane, period. In terms of 3D modeling, flight dynamics, sounds. Anything, everything is just good at this add-on. I can highly recommend it. Anyway, let's clean up the airplane. So I want to watch the Grand Prix in roughly 20 minutes, so we have to taxi to a parking spot quite rapidly. Let's make a 180 degrees turn on the runway here.
On
Backtrack the
runway
runway.
28.
Find ourselves a nice parking spot, and that will conclude the flight. Vacate the runway down here. Switch off the landing lights. Turn on the taxi lights. Auto brakes can be disarmed, by the way. Park, we have to turn left here, and we can switch off the strobe lights, by the way. So flaps are retracted, spoilers are up, auto brakes off. By the way, this is the AW Designs scenery. So let's park at Bravo 1. Switch off the taxi lights and the runway turn-off lights. We can switch off the probe heaters, by the way. And here we are, parking brake set, parked Princess Juliana Airport, arrived from Barbados. Let's set the external power on, and then we can switch off the engines, the beacon, the window heats. This one. Transponder can be off. Back to grounds. And that's it. That concludes our flight from Barbados to Sint Maarten. Barbados, standard X-plane scenery. Sint Maarten, Princess Juliana Airport. The AW Designs payware scenery can be bought on the .org store. Very nice scenery. Airplane FlyJSim 727-200 freighter. AmeriJet livery can be downloaded from xplane.org. And the weather en route was Active Sky XP. This is Professional Flight Planner X by Aerosoft for flight planning, and this is Navigraph Charge for the en route navigation. Nice flight, little bit of a mess up in this part of the approach, but then a perfect 10 DME arc, inbound, established, nice flight, perfect landing, on the right spot. So I'm happy, hope you liked the video. If you have any tips, tricks, comments, questions whatsoever, please leave them in the comment section below. As usual, please do so in a respectful manner, and I hope to see you all again on another flight in another video. So thank you for watching, and bye bye.